The narcissists you'll meet and never see coming. There is a particular kind of relationship that does not explode into your life with sirens and shattered glass. It enters quietly. It feels fated, even safe. You meet someone who seems attentive in a way that feels rare, who studies your face when you speak, who remembers small details, who mirrors your values and dreams so precisely it almost feels spiritual. You feel chosen, understood, seen. And that is precisely why you will not see it coming. The most dangerous narcissists are not always grandiose, loud, or theatrical. Many are subtle, charming, wounded, humble-seeming. They do not dominate the room. They study it. They do not demand admiration openly. They cultivate it slowly. And by the time the ground shifts beneath you, your emotional footing is already compromised. Psychologically, what makes these narcissists so difficult to detect is that they often present with traits that mimic emotional intelligence. They ask questions. They appear vulnerable. They share stories of past betrayals, positioning themselves as misunderstood or mistreated. Clinically, this early stage often involves mirroring a subconscious or deliberate imitation of your interests, beliefs, and emotional tone. Mirroring creates rapid intimacy because human beings are wired to feel safe with those who resemble us. For the narcissist, this stage supplies what psychologists call narcissistic supply: attention, admiration, and the reassurance that they are special. For the victim, the experience can feel intoxicating. Neurochemically, novelty and validation trigger dopamine release, strengthening attachment. The bond feels meaningful, even profound. But what feels like connection is often calibration. They are learning you. One of the narcissists you will never see coming is the rescuer. They enter your life during a vulnerable season, after a breakup, during career uncertainty, in a period of grief. They offer stability. They offer strength. They position themselves as the solution to your pain. At first, this feels like generosity. Psychologically, however, rescue can create dependency. The rescuer becomes central to your regulation. Instead of encouraging your autonomy, they subtly reinforce the idea that you need them. For the narcissist, this dynamic feeds a fragile self-concept. Being indispensable protects them from underlying shame. For the victim, the slow shift from gratitude to reliance can go unnoticed until independence feels threatening to them, not to you. Healing from this dynamic involves reclaiming self-efficacy, rebuilding routines, friendships, and competencies that exist outside the narcissist's orbit. Then there is the martyr narcissist. This is the one who never seems overtly cruel. Instead, they are perpetually burdened. They sacrifice endlessly. They endure so much. Conversations orbit around their exhaustion, their stress, their unfair treatment. If you express frustration, they remind you of everything they have carried. Psychologists recognize this as a form of covert control. By foregrounding their suffering, they neutralize your complaints before you fully articulate them. This dynamic is powered by unprocessed shame and a deep need for moral superiority. The narcissist maintains an identity of virtue. The victim absorbs guilt. Over time, you may find yourself suppressing legitimate needs because they feel selfish by comparison. Recovery requires learning to differentiate empathy from self-erasure. Compassion does not require silence. Another narcissist you may encounter is the charming collaborator, the coworker, friend, or partner who appears cooperative and supportive but subtly undermines you. They praise you publicly but question you privately. They agree enthusiastically but forget critical tasks. Passive aggression becomes their language. Clinically, this behavior allows them to discharge envy without confronting it consciously. Envy, for narcissistic personalities, threatens their internal hierarchy. Someone else's competence activates shame. Instead of acknowledging insecurity, they destabilize the source. For the victim, The impact is confusion and self-doubt. You sense sabotage but lack proof. The psychological toll is cumulative. Hypervigilance develops as you scan for inconsistencies. Protection here involves documentation, clear boundaries, and reducing emotional disclosure. Not every collaboration requires intimacy. The romantic narcissist often begins with intensity. They accelerate closeness, late-night confessions, future planning within weeks, statements about soulmates, and destiny. Psychologists refer to this as love bombing, though it rarely feels manipulative in the moment. It feels flattering. The speed bypasses your natural pacing mechanisms. Attachment forms before critical evaluation can catch up. For the narcissist, rapid fusion secures supply quickly and wards off abandonment anxiety rooted in early attachment wounds. For the victim, the withdrawal that follows feels catastrophic, because after intensity comes inconsistency. Calls go unanswered. Affection fluctuates. The very person who flooded you with certainty now withholds it. Trauma bonding often forms here. The brain becomes conditioned to chase the return of warmth. Healing involves slowing down future attachments, honoring pacing, and recognizing that sustainable intimacy unfolds gradually. You may also meet the intellectual narcissist. They do not shout, they correct. They frame condescension as education. Disagreements become lectures. If challenged, they shift the goalposts or introduce obscure references to reassert dominance. Psychologically, intellectual superiority becomes armor against deep-seated inadequacy. Knowledge is not shared, it is weaponized. For the victim, repeated invalidation of perspective erodes cognitive confidence. You may find yourself hesitating before speaking, pre-editing thoughts, or deferring automatically. Over time, this weakens internal authority. Recovery requires deliberate practice of independent thinking, engaging in discussions outside the narcissist's influence, writing reflections, rebuilding trust in your reasoning. The communal narcissist is perhaps the most confusing. They appear altruistic, deeply moral, even spiritually evolved. They volunteer, they advocate, they speak passionately about justice and compassion. Yet behind closed doors, their empathy has conditions. Recognition must follow generosity. Praise must accompany sacrifice. Psychologists note that communal narcissism allows individuals to derive superiority from perceived goodness. The narcissist's identity rests on being the most caring person in the room. If you question them, you threaten that identity. For victims, challenging this persona can feel impossible because the social environment reinforces it. Protection here involves separating public image from private behavior. Pay attention to patterns, not performances. Gaslighting is a thread that often weaves through all these forms. It rarely begins dramatically. It sounds like you're overthinking or that's not what happened. Over time, these subtle distortions accumulate. Neuroscience shows that chronic stress impairs memory consolidation and contextual recall, making self-doubt easier to implant. For the narcissist, gaslighting deflects accountability and protects against shame activation. For the victim, cognitive dissonance intensifies. To reduce psychological discomfort, many unconsciously assume fault. It feels safer to question yourself than to question the relationship. Healing requires external reality anchors, trusted friends, therapy, written records to counteract distortion. One of the most destabilizing aspects of these narcissists is their inconsistency. Warmth alternates with withdrawal. Praise turns into critique without warning. The nervous system adapts by becoming hypervigilant. You begin scanning tone, posture, silence. Clinically, this is a trauma response. The body learns that safety is unpredictable. Elevated cortisol and adrenaline create chronic anxiety and fatigue. For the narcissist, this dysregulation in others reinforces control. A destabilized partner is easier to influence. For the victim, regulation becomes the central task of recovery. Somatic therapies, breath work, and consistent routines help recalibrate a nervous system conditioned by unpredictability. Why don't we see them coming? Because many narcissists do not present as villains. They present as answers to loneliness, to uncertainty, to ambition, to meaning. They sense unmet needs with remarkable precision. Psychologically, individuals with narcissistic traits are often hyperattuned to social cues. This attunement, however, is self-serving. They read you not to understand you, but to position themselves advantageously. Recognizing this distinction is crucial. Empathy seeks mutuality. Narcissistic attunement seeks leverage. Leaving or emotionally detaching from such individuals is rarely simple. Trauma bonds complicate clarity. Intermittent reinforcement, periodic affection amidst neglect, strengthens attachment circuits more powerfully than consistent kindness. Breaking this cycle can produce withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, longing, even cravings for contact. This does not mean the relationship was healthy. It means your nervous system adapted. Strategies for healing include reducing exposure, practicing no contact or low contact when possible, and engaging in trauma-informed therapy that addresses attachment wounds. Rebuilding identity after encountering a narcissist involves reclaiming internal authority. You relearn that your perceptions are valid. You practice making decisions without external approval. You rebuild connections that are reciprocal rather than draining. Psychologists emphasize integration rather than erasure. The goal is not to forget what happened, but to contextualize it. Your reactions, hypervigilance, self-doubt, emotional numbing were intelligent adaptations to a destabilizing environment. The narcissists you'll meet and never see coming rarely arrive with warning labels. They arrive with charm, with wounded stories, with brilliance, with generosity. They reflect what you value most and slowly reposition themselves at the center of it. But understanding the psychology behind their patterns changes the story. When you learn how shame fuels control, how inconsistency creates trauma bonds, how gaslighting erodes perception, you begin to see clearly. And clarity is disruptive, because once you recognize the pattern, the illusion loses power. The narcissist may not change, but your awareness shifts the balance. You respond instead of react. You set boundaries instead of explaining endlessly. You pace intimacy instead of surrendering it. You understand that empathy without reciprocity is not love, it is depletion. In the end, protection is less about spotting a villain and more about strengthening your own internal compass. Narcissists thrive where self-doubt thrives. They flourish where boundaries are porous and validation is outsourced. The more anchored you are in your perception, your values, and your autonomy, the less room there is for manipulation to take root. You may not always see them coming, but once you understand the psychology, you will recognize the signs sooner. And recognition, quiet and steady, is where your power returns.